Gentlemen, welcome back to another video. We hope you're doing very good indeed. Today, indeed, we have a special guest, Mr. Sheldon Inwentash, the CEO of ThreeD Capital, who's joined us today. Sheldon, a great pleasure to have you. It's been long overdue, and we've had so many people waiting for this opportunity so we can sit down and have a chat with you. Very warm welcome.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I think the first thing we'd like to jump into, just to give everyone a sense of, who you are and what you've kind of accomplished, is kind of go over your philosophy for what you're doing with ThreeD Capital. It's important for investors to understand that, this isn't your first venture into building a capital fund like this. Pine Tree, back in the day, you built that to over $1 billion, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, 770 million in assets. So maybe kind of go through your philosophy and, some of the things that you learned from your days with Pine Tree and how you're relating that to ThreeD Capital today.
No, absolutely. Well, first thing, Pine Tree was a very interesting evolution, basically from 1992 to 2012 or something like that. So we had many big years, and a lot of people bought homes based on their investment in Pine Tree. But the philosophy then is the same philosophy I have now, but there's a differentiation. And the philosophy is, I've tended to be reasonably accurate in where I think the world is going, whether on the macro level, on macroeconomic level, and a technology evolution level. I used to be an oil and gas analyst in the 80s, and I realized that it's not going to go forever, and there's got to be other forms of energy before the clean world. And so I kind of look at the big picture, and then I drill down and I go, okay, these are the 4, 5, 6 verticals I want to be in, because there's going to be pull demand for their technologies or products or minerals, depending on this, and everything is based on cycles, as you well know. The differentiation, with Pine Tree was I basically I probably over-invested in a number of companies, even though we had many big exits. The ThreeD Capital is much more measured, in fewer investments, more hands-on. I'm very hands-on right now with my son, Jackson. And we keep in touch with all our companies. We advise many of them, and that sort of differs from the way Pine Tree was. But in terms of the big picture, it's the same philosophy.
Right. So what are you seeing macro level now that's kind of changed in the last few years? And where do you see things going? Because, you have a fairly even split. Well, it's a little bit heavier on the tech side than the junior mining side. So what are you seeing in the next 3 to 5 years for where everything's kind of headed towards?
So I've always been, I won't say a gold bug, but, my background's I'm a CPA, so I read financial statements and I look at the financial statements of the, U.S. government primarily. It's pretty well mirrored in the rest of the world, but maybe more measured there. And it's basically just a debt balloon. And so that's what really gave me the impetus in the early 2000s, and actually I did it with Eric, and Eric's brought in a lot of investments, is really go very deep into gold as the hedge against currency risk, which is a function of balance sheet risk. And so that theme has never left me. I believe that the new paradigm shift is in digital currencies, of which many people in the gold market won't accept, but I totally accept. And I believe that, let's call it Bitcoin, which is the ultimate brand in a digital currency, is a headwind for gold. I believe if Bitcoin didn't exist, gold would be higher. But not that they're mutually exclusive. I believe they can coexist. But that is a key feature of why we are involved in alternative investments / the mineral side, which is based more on discovery, and then also on the blockchain side. I believe in blockchain as a utility big time. I believe it's going to add value and improve the supply chains, reduce costs, reduce friction, more transparency. even though there's headwinds from let's call it a governmental standpoint, I believe it's going to prevail. It's going to have its life, and it's going to go deeper and deeper into society. So that then brings out the whole area of digital technology, and that is obviously exploding for other reasons, with the the COVID pandemic and everything else. So these things, in my view, all tie together. Then, and from the mineral standpoint, a new paradigm. It's not new. I was involved in it 10 years ago. Is the whole area of rare earths, which is a function of technology and the advancement of technology to create new materials. So that is also a focus of ours. There are not that many viable deposits on the planet, but because it wasn't my first rodeo, I've been able to really figure out the prime suspects in terms of the companies to invest in. So, really it has to do with macro sort of currency risk, and then technology. And then out of that technology is coming new industries like EV, ESG, environmentally sensitive materials, products, etc. We're witnessing, we are witnessing the hottest summer of my lifetime. And even though the weather's nice, it's caused a lot of damage and fires and everything else. So they're really, the one thing I say to people, and sorry for being long-winded, is that in the olden days, it used to be you invest in gold, precious metals, they went up, the stock market went down, and then you had vice versa, a great stock market, and obviously interest rates were a function of that. Today, there are multiple verticals that no one ever realized would occur, and it's snowballing. It's going exponential in the last, I'll call it 10 years. And we're seeing companies, whether it be on the biotech side, I mean, Moderna is bigger than Merck today. And who would have thought that 10 years ago? You would have never thought a startup could actually get there that quickly. So there are so many places to invest. And to me, it's the most exciting time of my venture capital lifetime, based on how the world's evolving.
Brilliant. Sheldon, that's correct. We are at that inflection point in technology, and most of these tech companies were founded during uncertain times. You look at Uber, you look at Apple, most of them were founded during the times of hardship economically, mostly. I wanted to ask you about Canada. What are the challenges that you see that these new young tech companies are facing in the country? Because I think we are attracting the brightest talents from around the world, and we have a very strong education system here. Do you think Canada could overtake the US or even match them perhaps in the next couple of years?
We have a population differential. They have a machine down there that's called the U.S. military and the U.S. college system that we cannot compete against. There's no way. But, Bill Gates with Microsoft has been recruiting engineers from Waterloo University just outside Toronto for probably 30 years. So we have outstanding schools. We have outstanding entrepreneurs. We don't have the venture capital system that the U.S. has that really allows best of breed companies to get financed before they go public. In other words, they are sponsored with great, ex-CEOs, join VC firms, and really can give their mentorship to these emerging technologies. So do I believe and hence there's the opportunity, because I believe that, and I see it. I see a firm like H.C. Wainwright coming up to Canada and buying left and right blockchain firms, because the valuations in Canada are a fraction of what they would be in the U.S., trading on NASDAQ, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously the evolution is get to NASDAQ and you'll bump your valuation. But in terms of mines, we have our fair share of brilliance here. But I would say that we don't have the same intensity of capital to support these emerging companies and ideas.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one issue that we kind of identified is the access to capital for Canadian tech companies. They typically have to go public sooner than they maybe should, because there's just not that access to capital. So is ThreeD Capital kind of trying to build towards being that venture cap kind of firm that can kind of bring these companies along and be like that in the United States and get that access to capital to where you can kind of bring these companies along and help them grow. Like you take Peak, for example, Peak Fintech. They just raised $52 million. I mean, 5 years ago, that's probably unheard of in Canada. Like, what are you kind of seeing there?
Well, we are a microcosm of the U.S., and I believe that really what we're doing at ThreeD, other people are doing it in different ways through family offices and otherwise. Like, there's a lot more breadth and depth in the investment space in Canada because of companies like Shopify that have just created tremendous wealth and breadth to that wealth. And then a lot of the family offices tend to be businesses that families had reinvested their money and now suddenly are finding it's a lot of fun, and they like to build investing in juniors. But they'll do it more as a portfolio type of thing where they'll have safe investments and so forth. The differentiation with ThreeD is, and it was the same with Pine Tree. I said, I'm here for 50 baggers. That's all I'm here for. I'm here to find the needle in the haystack. And, I felt Peak was one. It was a struggling company. I had to chase the company for a month before they'd return my phone calls. I had a vision of what I think they could be. It's way exceeded that, I must admit. It snowballed, and I didn't think management was as good as it was. I wouldn't say I didn't think it. I didn't know them. And, the one thing about Canada is we lack the same type of entrepreneurs, the serial entrepreneurs that you have in the US that have great management teams that have done it before. That is probably our number one weakness. So that's what, we identify here at ThreeD, and we go, listen, you need help. We'll give you help from this standpoint, that standpoint, and try to make up for the gaps in your knowledge and your experience. And, that's what we do. That's what I've done, a big part of my career.
Awesome. Brilliant. Sheldon, I also wanted to talk about digitization. That's a real fact that we are, going through. If I'm a nerd, so I'm a boring guy. I listen to conference calls and earnings calls, every afternoon when I go for a walk or a jog. That's my entertainment and hobby. I've seen an increasing trend in a number of CEOs who are talking about metaverse digitization, and that's a very rapidly accelerating trend. I want to talk about one of your companies that you have. You also interviewed the CEO of that particular company, and that's ThreeD. They're in a very particularly interesting yet unknown space. Would you be able to elaborate more on what ThreeD is, and also why did you invest in ThreeD so early on?
Well, I actually invested in ThreeD. I think I invested in the protocol TOTA before ThreeD. So we are very involved in TOTA. In fact, we have 5 other startups that really are immaterial in terms of their investment, but they're really starting to come into the light. So there's a whole TOTA ecosystem that's based on this protocol that's not blockchain, but is scalable and accomplishes what blockchain has not been able to accomplish. And that is really what sort of led as ThreeD as an application. And ThreeD, listen, all major successes in my experience have all pivoted. They've all started off with one way, and then they've realized, there's a wall, there's a cliff, whatever it is, and take what they have, and they don't change businesses, but they just morph and evolve. And ThreeD has done that. And the victory amongst that, and really what ThreeD is now is a fraction of what ThreeD will become. They are, they're really Internet 3.0. They have created this whole world of containerizations, which I am now seeing to be replicated. But what they did is they had so many applications that for a small company, which is undercapitalized, because all small companies are undercapitalized, they had a problem, I think, in focusing on one thing and having the first thing, COVID came into it and really disrupted their ability to do some things that they were doing in a very exciting way in South Korea. But what they did is, Hassan Khan, who's very capable and realized that, we've got to change. I can't go to South Korea anymore. I can't be face to face, and they've got to attract capital, and they morphed into the whole area of identification. So to basically prove people's originality or their DNA, if you will. And this caught the interest of Red Hat / IBM in doing their transactions and so forth. And this is a small subset of what I sort of see this company and this technology and protocol being able to do. But, to do a deal with Red Hat, IBM, and they're working with both sides of those major enterprises, and with a launch that's coming. So they announced just recently, massive milestone. Not really, it's funny when you're private, you don't get this, you don't measure it. You can't measure it in the same way you can measure a public company because the stock goes up. And so here you are, you're excited, and we put up as ThreeD Capital a bit more money into a bridge kind of round that's going on right now. We introduced this whole graphene vertical to them that is going to become part of their backbone on their asset base. That's going to underpin Toda Notes, which is going to be their like token if it was a traditional sort of crypto company. So Toda is an extremely disruptive platform. The underlying protocol, as well as what TodaQ is doing, utilizing that protocol in many different verticals. So it's one of these companies that, because it's private, we can't, we don't arm wave, we don't talk about it very often, but it could be probably one of many surprises to come out of our portfolio.
Yeah, excellent. Speaking of another surprise that could be coming out of the portfolio, PNR is another one that we've kind of looked deeply into. We know that it was one of, if not the biggest copper nickel mine in the world at one point in time, if not still today. Billions of dollars invested into it. Unfortunately, it was shut down, I believe, in 2010 or so, like in that area when copper prices and that kind of tanked. So maybe talk a little bit about PNR and how that's going and what the plans are for bringing that public, if you're able to talk about it at all.
No, I can talk about it in a certain amount. It's a private company. We own approximately 10% of the company. I started working on this project with an associate, Arno Brand, who's a Namibian, in 2018. So we were doing what we have another company called 1 Billion. It's private, but we were basically creating, a massive incubator of potential. It was a very depressed time in the gold market, and we basically were able to secure major swaths of land that are very, very, potentially lucrative here with these prices of gold. But while we were doing that, and that was sort of on the side, we came across the fact that this asset was in bankruptcy and was going to a competitive process for resurrection. And at one point, it was part of this deposit was the old lion ore. And I believe lion ore sold for something like $8 billion. There's a lot of Lamborghinis around Vancouver because of lion ore. And this is much bigger than lion ore. There's 9 properties in it. We were able to, and I put forward my balance sheet on ThreeD Capital to get access to the data room and be a qualified bidder. And then we were narrowed down. We found, I think, the best management team that there is in nickel that is not at a large company. And we collaborated to go to become the preferred bidder. And now we're hoping within 45 days to go to a definitive agreement, which is a massive milestone. And we've shown the project to really smart geos and investors and whatever, and they're over the moon on the potential upside. So currently there's a major asset there in terms of nickel copper, and if you with PGM credits, but if you look at the EV market today and batteries and so forth, nickel is a serious problem to get. And not only that, the nickel, let's call it buyers, need it to be clean. It needs to be green. So, you can't have these dirty old smelters, which this company had and was shut down. And so we're acquiring it with not taking on the environmental responsibilities of that. And we're going to turn it into a fully green mine. So the upside there is tremendous, but the drilling upside, we think, could potentially, put this in the category of a Voisey Bay. And, I know that's big word speaking, but the system we know goes for 9 kilometers. And this group that's done all this work, they've been there many times. We've done a lot of due diligence. Our application was, I think, 300 or 400 pages, like about 6 feet off the ground. So we've done everything from metallurgy to engineering to geological assessment and everything. So this could be just, I won't say a sleeper because it's not, but it's private. And we're hoping that we'll be public probably Q1 next year.
Incredible.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Hammond, do you have a follow-up question or?
No, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, Sheldon, I was going through your background, I have to be honest, and I found that you're also a very keen art collector, and that's an interesting topic maybe not many people know. Connecting art to the NFTs. Do you think NFTs were a temporary short-term hype, or do you think that will have a future?
No, I think NFTs have a massive future, but not necessarily in art. And, yes, I'm a collector of contemporary art, and I think collecting art in the way I do is very similar to the way I run my business, where I take emerging artists and I bet on them. I ask a bunch of questions, do my due diligence, visit them in the studio, look at their track record of exhibitions and whatever it is. And it's, I've punched in the, like in the 80-90% success rate there. But NFTs, I believe, are going to have many, many applications. And do I believe it's here to stay? 100%. Is every company going to be successful? No. It's, some people sort of say, why would I pay for a JPEG? And, it's about a bit of the mindset, and it's a subset of the metaverse where people want to own things that are unique, that only they can have, and they can experience, and they can share at their own leisure. And it's a very, it's a big topic, but it's very real. And we are in the throes right now of investing in 2 NFT companies, and looking at what is evolving out there. People are going to be quite surprised at the utility of these NFTs, not just a picture of a painting, like Beeple or something like that, which it was, I think, a phenomenon. It was basically a couple crypto billionaires just duking it out, and it was an ego thing. That's what I believe. I don't believe you can measure that value of 69 million and apply it to everything else. Unless currencies become worth nothing, and then, the whole crypto world just crossed 2 trillion. And I remember when it was 300 billion about, a year and a half ago. So, there's really a legitimacy there, and that is going to tie in very nicely to NFTs.
Brilliant. So following up on your betting, obviously you're betting on people, but you also bet on younger companies at a very, very early stage. And we have a lot of young followers at StockFam who love to invest in these younger companies and obviously make that, generational wealth, if you wish. What are the certain factors that you look at when you're trying to evaluate this very early on companies that you're betting on, whether it's management, industry, maybe, our younger followers can, devise some advice from your experience as well?
Well, there's no substitute for grinding it out and doing your own work, whatever that means. People use the word due diligence. It's a nice phrase, but my experience is you can have a great product with a potential market, and you just have management that screws it all up, and it has to do with inexperience. So have they got any experience is pretty important. There's not too many natural Mark Zuckerbergs out there. I mean, we all know that there's dozens of them, but dozens of them over millions of people. How many failures do many of these people have before they're successful? So people is just I used to joke that a great CEO could bring a new fork company and forks for eating and make it successful, because they would know how to market it, they know how to get their costs down and so forth. You want to also, what I like to see is a proprietary edge through IP, and that's kind of a big part of what we do as well. We want to know that company has some protection, and there's a barrier to entry for others entering that same space. So I think the intellectual property, depending if it's technology, obviously, is quite important. But it also could be your location of your property. I mean, in another application or another industry. So you do as much reading as you can, and you ask as many questions as you can, and you don't believe everything you're told.
Yeah. No, 100%. There's so much misinformation out there. Our goal is to kind of try and bridge that gap from retail investors and these companies to kind of help promote proper information and the real, quote unquote, due diligence. In terms of, another company that's kind of emerging that we haven't really talked about, that's actually one of our favorites is AMP Technologies. Can you touch on AMP a little bit and why you like it? It's been pretty quiet for the last, 2 or 3 months, but which is normal. These companies are head down doing lots behind the scenes. So what's your take on AMP Technologies?
First thing, AMP is a combination of very unique technologies, and putting it all together, they've created applications that there is a big and growing need for, whether it's reducing latency, which is big in the video sports arenas and other applications. I just got an update on the company. I'm very sensitive to talking about it. But I would say that AMP is where peak Fintech was a year ago, in terms of growing revenue and demonstrating the potential that they could have in the world and niche that they're in.
Well, that's a incredible comparison, but I mean, it's not out of the realm of like reality. I mean, when we talked to Anthony last, he mentioned to us about the pods and how much they could generate, and then the virtual production studio, how much that could generate once that all gets going. So he's been very conservative on their number projections without really including a lot of this stuff. So, it doesn't take much. And with high performance computing, you can't run AI, machine learning type applications or digital twinning or esports off of your typical Amazon AWS service, right? So this high performance computing and reducing the latency is going to be very important for a lot of digitalization and in AI and whatnot. So I agree. I think AMP is going to be very interesting.
I think they need some use cases. I think that's going to be very important, and then people realize how they can grow it out. And just another point I'll make is that Facebook, Zuckerberg came out and basically said he wants Facebook to be a metaverse company and at the center of the metaverse. Well, you know what? AMP is in that world. And even Intel today made a very interesting announcement of I don't know if they came out with their quarter or whatever, what the CEO was on. And what he talked about had a lot of relevance for AMP, and we pass that on. Anthony's pretty good at knowing what's going on out there, so they are in maybe one of the hottest spaces to come, and they've gotten no respect because they're really a very small company, pre-revenue, quietly been building their technology for quite some time, but now I believe we're heading towards the intersection of where their capabilities and real applications meet, and I think the revenue growth, could begin sooner rather than later.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it was very interesting that you mentioned that, because as soon as I saw that Zuckerberg unveiling of the metaverse that Facebook has, virtual reality. We quickly tweeted that out, didn't we, Hammy? And
Yeah,
we
we
put
did.
and as a center of it, because to have that virtual reality, metaverse, you need to have the infrastructure in place before you go ahead with that. So they are certainly building that, and Anthony's very good at building a very good, efficient, and lean company. That's certainly what he's been doing. Let's address the elephant in the room, Sheldon. Let's talk about. Can we say the darling of your portfolio, Peak Fintech? They've done a phenomenal job recently. They had to be quiet for a couple of months. But finally, the word is getting out there, as in what a phenomenal company that he is, and the execution has been immaculate financially, and in terms of partnerships.
The company's executed. Management is very transparent. If you follow the monthly bulletin they file, they basically tell you what's going on. There's no cloak and dagger here. The market is absolutely staggeringly large, and they've demonstrated through bidding processes and so forth that their technology is superior to others. So you add that together with their footprint in China, and China's getting a lot of bad press these days of what's going on with the government, yet they are kind of distinctly outside of that sphere of negativism. And I think it's because of the people they have there and how they do their business and what the government is trying to sort of, I won't say crack down on, but manage better. But Peak obviously has performed well in the market. They're well capitalized to execute. They're going to turn that money into value in the company. But what was very important, and I was sort of involved in helping it behind the scenes, was a Cubular acquisition. If there was a risk point in the company, it was the license that Cubular had given them and the limited time left on that license, in addition to Cubular's business model, which is a different vertical than Peak's and involves the monetization of data in private companies. And through a subscription model, I think that they're going to bring a whole other dimension to Peak. First thing, they'll be able to diversify it outside China, which I think everybody would like to see because of the unknowns. So North America is the bigger 800-pound gorilla. They'll be able to go there with a similar model, B2B, and then they'll be able to launch the Cubular network and the Cubular engine. And that is going to even. So what I found quite interesting in the press release, when they announced the acquisition of Cubular, they said they're going to revise their guidance. And anybody that's looked at their guidance either doesn't believe it at all. Well, they didn't believe it when they came out with it, but now I think they believe it. But literally, I had a call yesterday with, let's call it a strategic investor in one of our companies, and he's been involved in Peak, and he says, I believe that they're going to deliver, and if they do, it's $100 stock. And this is a guy that represents institutions, not a retail arm-waving guy. But if you look at a company like Upstart in a similar industry, I think they went public at $20 or $40, and like a year ago or bit more, I'm not sure, and they're over $200 now, and they just raised like 800 million. So once you get in the leagues of top line growth and the market has confidence that you're going to deliver your guidance or exceed it, the valuations are exponential. So really, for the most of the world, 99% of the world, once it gets on NASDAQ, Peak is beginning. People are going to think NASDAQ was their IPO. And they're going to look at it and go, wow, $10 is cheap for this stock. So we're looking at it through a penny stock eyes because we all began investing in it when it was a penny stock. The bones were there. It just didn't get the respect of the market. And, it was still early days. But, I've been involved in the company for less than a year. And I'm beyond thrilled at really management and what they've been able to accomplish and their transparency. And so it's been a tremendous company to work with.
Do you reckon it could follow in the footsteps of the likes of Shopify and be another star in how great Canada can be in companies out of Canada?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Shopify is a very unique company, very unique platform. But can Peak be the same thing? I don't really like to arm wave at that level, but could Peak be another upstart? I go absolutely. And so Peak could be $100 stock. It's just the numbers work, the math works. And if you add Cubular in and you believe in Cubular, and I don't think most people really understand really deeply what Cubular does, and they won't until it's actually out there and launched. And then people will realize that this is a complementary, application that is outside the box of their current business. And I think that they'll even get a bigger multiple because of that.
100%. I
We
think
will
the
take
B2B.
Upstart as a comparison.
I think
I'm sorry?
like
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean. No, I was just going to say, I think as the B2B model versus the B2C, I think that fills a bigger gap. Than, I mean, there's so many B2C other platforms out there, but I mean, what Cubular offers is very unique. Creating this global business economy through B2B interaction, I think, is something that the likes of Square and maybe even Ant Financial would be looking at it, to fill some of their gaps in their systems. So that's kind of how I look at it.
You avoid these privacy issues with consumers and individuals, where really that's China, one of their big problems with Ant and a lot of the other social media platforms. Business is different. Business is about statistics, and it's about numbers and trends and so forth, and everybody wants that data, including governments. But that's business. It's not sort of, well, these are the types of diapers I buy or something like that, and you don't want people to know that, or you don't want people to know that you're doing certain things. So from that standpoint, both the Peak platform and the Cubular platform, I believe could see tremendous growth and really a pull in, a desire to buy that data from those companies, from Peak.
Awesome. So we're getting at about 36 minutes here. I don't want to keep you too much longer. We've had an incredible conversation. Maybe let's give some of the investors, maybe new or even that have been following 3D Capital, just a little idea of what to expect in the coming months, or maybe just why you think 3D Capital is a good investment at this point. I mean, I know we're seeing the announcement of the buyback. I think that's something very important that investors should pay attention to. Maybe just kind of discuss that a little bit before we head off today.
Yeah, well, I'm a believer in what we're doing. I believe the stock is cheap. When the whole life of Pine Tree Capital, we would trade at about 2.5 times NAV. We were very unique in that way. And I think that a big part of that had to do with our proprietary deal flow. So we're not just like a fund where, ARK's disruptive on a macro scale, and they go out and they buy a Tesla, and then now they decide they're going to buy Bitcoin. And they're sort of buying these very mature, larger scale enterprises. And, we buy early. We like to get in at the seed level, and we basically say we'd like to participate all the way along. And obviously, those journeys can be tough, but extremely rewarding. So people that have an appetite or want to, put a percentage of their portfolio into a basket of very early companies that they most likely would not get access to because A, they're private, or B, the circles are very small in terms of who gets to finance them. We also provide, value-added advice that's, been respected in a number of cases and has led to other companies through referrals and so forth. We've got a big following now, and there's a lot of deals that come our way that we believe people want us involved. So that gives us a distinct advantage over your traditional fund that might want to trade at a discount. And then we have the explosive, engine of our private companies, whether it be TotaQ or PNR, or, we're involved in some DeFi projects that, have not yet. We have criteria on disclosure, which we've established. So once they become disclosable, we disclose them. So these are the reasons I'm excited. I believe that, as long as the shares trade in this range, we'll continue to buy them back. We're doing very well. We're making money. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to buy those shares back. And that's I feel I'm just investing in myself, and I know what's going on.
100%.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. There's another aspect of you, Sheldon, that maybe many don't know and we've researched, is that you're a big advocate of social justice, and you've done a great deal of work on that space before. Do you want to talk about how COVID has caused disproportionate inequality in society? And if you have one piece of advice for younger followers or investors that they want to perhaps change their lives through investments, I think they will appreciate from someone who's 30 odd years of experience in investing.
You got to give back, and there's no greater gift than giving back. My wife's a social worker. She's always dealt with the problems of society, and she's been recognized for it, through an Order of Canada and an Order of Ontario. And, through that, I've learned a lot. It's opened up my eyes, and I've supported it. It's made me a better person. Right now, we're involved in Botswana. We're going to help the government with giving them probably a couple hundred ventilators. It's going to cost us maybe $250,000 in one of our companies. And, we're doing it because a lot of these countries just can't compete in terms of providing what's necessary for their people. But, I think for a young investor, you got to balance. Like everything in life, if you balance it, it's more rewarding. You learn more. It's not just about grabbing as much as you can, because at the end of the day, that will be your downfall if you don't have a balanced, philosophy or values in life. So it's stood me well. It's led me to good places, and I think that's also reflected in the positive attitude of the companies that we're involved in.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sheldon. It was great finally getting the chance to speak to you about everything disruptive tech, mining, and investments. I'm sure everyone else equally enjoyed it as much as we did. Thank you so much, and hopefully we can have you back on the show very, very soon. Thank you so much.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sheldon.
Of course. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.